Hi gorgeous, and a very happy Frugal Friday to you. If you are new to the channel, welcome. I make videos like this every Friday, focusing on drugstore makeup. I also make videos on Mondays and Wednesdays, but Friday is my dedicated series for drugstore makeup. So please subscribe so you don't miss out on any videos coming out in future Frugal Friday installments. Today I'm testing out a couple of dupes for you for the Huda Nudes palette. And the Huda Nudes palette was very recently released. This palette retails for $65, and I've had so many questions from so many of you asking, have you found a dupe? Is there something out there that is a little more affordable but of the same great quality? So these have come up on my radar. I wanted to share with you what they look like. I'll show you swatches at the end, and I'll give you a complete review for each one. Have we found a more affordable dupe? Or should we just keep waiting? For this side-by-side comparison, I am going to use the Huda Beauty palette on this eye, and I'm going to use the Beauty Glazed palette on this eye. So high-end and dupe. I do also have an eyeshadow primer applied. I used the one from Milani today on both eyes. And the first shade I'm going to take from both of these palettes is Bisque from Beauty Glazed and Lace from Huda Beauty. And I'm applying that eyeshadow directly into the crease. And this is a light lilac, lavender, that's how I would describe it. Very light application with the Huda palette. I think I'm going to need a little bit more on the brush there. Soft and easy application, blends nicely. I have had to dip my brush into the eyeshadow 3 times now. And I'm not talking about one simple tap, I'm talking about maybe 3 taps to get enough product onto the brush, which is surprising to me that it's taken me that many times to grab product. I'm taking the same amount of product from the Beauty Glazed side, and I'm going to apply that in the crease also. Same level of pigment over here too. Light application like I had with the Huda Beauty palette. Are they trying to dupe the application too? I don't know, it cracks me up because sometimes these affordable palettes give you such greater pigmentation. But it looks like they're really trying to mimic the Nudes palette. Just like with the Huda side, I've had to apply 3 layers to get the level of pigment you're seeing here on the eyes. Next eyeshadows I'm taking from these palettes are Love Bite from the Huda Beauty palette, and what I can only assume is meant to say maroon from the Beauty Glazed palette. Doesn't it look like it should say that? It says Marin. I'm not sure, we'll call it Marin. And we're applying that shade directly into the socket line of the eye. This appears to be a dark plummy purple. And I'm also going to apply this color on the outer third of the lid and bring it into the inner third of the lid. And we'll do the same thing over here with our Marin shade, which I can tell you by comparison with the Huda Beauty eyeshadow, when I tapped the brush into this eyeshadow, you could tell the pigment was richer, and you can even see it here on application, which I was expecting at least one of these eyeshadows to function that way, and it looks like this one is. So a little bit goes a long way, and I'm applying that to the inner corner also, and you can see I barely tapped my brush into the eyeshadow for that application. And look at how strong the color there is. I mean, the color is there on the inner corner of the eye. Whoa. I'm also going to go back with the light orange at the top of this palette. From Huda Beauty, it's called Play, and from the Beauty Glazed palette, it's called Peachy. I'm adding a small amount of this on top of the edges of the first eyeshadow and blending it into the brow. The shade from Beauty Glazed is a little deeper by comparison, so I'm only adding a very small amount. Okay, I may need a little more than that. I need to see it. That one is appearing to be a bit more pink by comparison, but it still is a pretty good match over here. The last eyeshadows I'm taking from these palettes are Daydream from Huda Beauty and Blink from the Beauty Glazed palette. And this is one of those really unique shimmers in the palette. I'm applying this directly on the middle of the lid. Look at that, look at that. Oh, that's gorgeous. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of a pigment from MAC. I can never, I can never say the name. I'm gonna try though. Kitschma's, I butchered it, but if you've ever used it, you know which one I'm talking about. That's what this reminds me of a little bit. I barely had to use that much eyeshadow to get what you're seeing there on my eye, and I had a little bit of fallout, but overall, well, now that I smeared it, it looks really bad, but overall I didn't have too much glitter fallout, not like I would expect with a very glitter-packed eyeshadow like this. I'm taking the same shade from Beauty Glazed, which, by the way, when you go to pick these eyeshadows up, both of these palettes, the eyeshadow basically crumbles under the brush. So they copied the formula right. It's almost like jelly when you press your brush into it. And same thing over here. I'm applying that to the middle of the lid. And when I swatched this, I was like, what? What? Oh my gosh. Oh, that's so pretty. And I'm loving it. Loving. And look at how intense it is over here too, with one layer compared to Huda Beauty. I feel like it's crazy, crazy pigmented over here. Both formulas do grab onto your brush extremely well, I will tell you that. And when you apply it to the lid, they do grab onto your skin extremely well too. So I haven't had issues with either one of these on application. The Huda Beauty was a little lighter than Beauty Glazed. Same amount of fallout over here as I had with Huda Beauty. Not a big deal. I'm going to take a makeup removing wipe and get that excess off of my face. That Beauty Glazed palette was pretty doggone close to the Huda Nudes palette, but there are still some differences that I'd like to point out for you in the swatches. Beauty Glazed has been swatched on the top row and Huda Beauty is swatched on the bottom row. I'm showing you the first two rows of these palettes. There were a lot more similarities than there were differences, so that was a nice quality to see between the two palettes. But when you swatch the third row of both of these palettes side by side, there are no dupes whatsoever to be found here. The eyeshadows in the Beauty Glazed palette are much different than the Huda Nudes palette, unfortunately. The two most unique eyeshadows that I feel like you can find in the Huda Nudes palette would be the shades Excite and Infatuated. But if you refer back to the Athena palette that I reviewed last year, this is from Bad Habit Beauty, the Athena palette. This shade right here, this is also a dupe for Huda's Desert Dusk, by the way, is pretty doggone similar to Huda's Excite eyeshadow that she put in the Nudes palette. For the shade Infatuated, that one is pretty unique, and Beauty Glazed was not able to dupe it, unfortunately. So out of the 18 eyeshadows that you get in the Huda Nudes palette, you really get 10 solid dupes with the Beauty Glazed palette, in my opinion. So it's a pretty good dupe for the price that you're paying for Huda Nudes. Bad Habit Beauty will come out with something in the future. I'm sure that they will, but for now I feel like this is a pretty good alternative. Beauty Creations also has a palette called Tease Me, and there were a lot of people thinking that this might be a dupe for the Huda Nudes palette. So I took some time, swatched the eyeshadows, compared the two side by side. You can see what I mean here. When you look at them side by side, you can already see that there are not as many dupes as what one may initially think when they see this palette online. That's why I like to get some of these palettes in person and really test them out for you so you're not wasting your money on things that may not be a dupe. And this one is not close. It's not as close as the Beauty Glazed palette at all. There are only 3 shades in the Beauty Creations palette that could even remotely compare to the Huda Nudes palette. First one being Orgasm from the Beauty Creations palette. This is a dupe for the Huda Nudes eyeshadow Secret. Secret is a little darker by comparison. You can see that in the swatch here, but pretty close. The next eyeshadow from the Beauty Creations palette is Fire, and that is an almost dupe for Huda's Kinky eyeshadow. The Kinky eyeshadow has more purple tones in it, and you can probably see that if you look real closely between the swatches here. Fire is much more red by comparison. And the last eyeshadow that you can find in the Beauty Creations palette is Desire, and that is a dupe for Huda's Raw eyeshadow. Although the Raw shade is a touch redder, I mean, if you're going to be picky and you really study these two, you'll see the minor difference, but that's probably the closest eyeshadow out of all the ones that I compared. Did you see that one of my eyeshadows got busted? Don't you love it when you get eyeshadow palettes in the mail and you can't even use the eyeshadow? I may try to press it back together. But by the way, I do want to say, if you do not care that the Beauty Creations Tease Me palette is an exact dupe for the Huda Nudes palette, because it's not, it's still a really good palette. There are some excellent shades in here and the quality is outstanding. When I was swatching these, I was like, yes, yes, yes. And for those wondering if the Huda New Nudes palette is good, worth getting, I'd say yes. I mean, if you want to spend the money, go for it. It's not bad quality. The eyeshadows are very creamy, very buttery, easy to smooth, easy to smooth. That's another way to say easy to blend, but yes, I mean, it is great quality, but like I said, if you're looking for a cheaper alternative, I think the Beauty Glazed one is your best bet right now. Like I said, wait a little while and I'm sure Bad Habit Beauty or some company on the Shop Hush website will come out with something that is a lot more affordable. Let me know what you thought about these dupes today, what you think about the new Nudes palette from Huda Beauty. Share your thoughts below. Thanks so much for taking the time to watch. Please subscribe for more videos like this in the future, and I look forward to seeing you again next time.